Have you ever had one of those moments where you replay an awkward interaction in your head from 10 years ago and suddenly feel the urge to disappear into the void? Like, you're simply minding your own business, making a cup of coffee, and bam, your brain's like, hey, you remember that time you waved back at someone who wasn't waving at you? And now you have to fight the urge to legally change your name and move to a new country. Yeah, me too. But today, we're not just talking about cringe-worthy moments. We're diving into the deeper, stickier kind. The kind of mistakes we keep replaying because they've shaped us in ways we didn't even realize. The patterns that keep us stuck. One of mine, tolerating poor treatment from others instead of addressing it immediately. Now, that's a tough pill to swallow, but here's the truth. What you tolerate teaches people how to treat you. And for a long time, I was a straight-up professor in the school of letting people get away with too much. So let's get into it. But first, hi, welcome to the Wolverine Lifestyle Podcast, where personal growth meets deep thought and introspection. I am your host, Dillon Andres, and in this episode, we are exploring my personal journey through the journal prompt, replaying past mistakes. What mistake do you replay in your mind? What lesson can you learn from it, and how can you let it go? If you've ever found yourself stuck in a cycle of people-pleasing, tolerating disrespect, or putting up with less than you deserve, this episode is for you. Grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's break this pattern together. Let's start with the mistake itself. For years, I had a tendency to tolerate poor treatment from others. I would rationalize it, downplay it, or convince myself that I was just being understanding. But the truth? I was allowing people to walk all over me because deep down, I believed I didn't deserve any better. And I know I'm not alone in that. How many times have you made excuses for someone's behavior? How often have you swallowed your feelings simply to avoid confrontation? How many times have you told yourself, it's not that bad, when you knew damn well that it was? Hey, I get it. I've been there. The phrase, be mindful about what you tolerate because it teaches people how to treat you, it exists for a reason. And trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way. Now, this wasn't just one instance. This was a pattern, a series of moments where I let things slide. I bit my tongue, and I prioritized keeping the peace over standing up for myself. And surprise, surprise, this habit didn't just affect my relationships with others, it affected my relationship with myself. Here's the real kicker. My tolerance for poor treatment was actually a reflection of how I saw myself. It was a cycle that went something like this. Someone treats me poorly, I tolerate it and resort to people-pleasing because I want them to like me. Then, I abandon myself in the process. Then, I start building resentment, but not towards them, towards myself. And then, I feel like crap. My self-worth takes a hit. And then, I start seeing life through this low-vibe, self-doubting lens. And then, I attract people who fit this same narrative. And then, that cycle repeats. Sound familiar? I had to take a step back and ask myself, how much of my suffering was self-inflicted? How many times did I allow situations to unfold simply because I refused to set a boundary? How often did I trade my peace for someone else's comfort? The hard truth, I was doing it to myself just as much as anyone else was doing it to me. Here are some signs that you're stuck in this cycle. First, you make excuses for how others treat you. Second, you put their needs above your own, even when it hurts you. And the third, you feel drained after interactions, but convince yourself you're just being nice. And the fourth, you hold resentment instead of setting boundaries. If you're nodding your head right now, stick with me, because breaking this cycle is in fact possible. I remember one specific time when I let someone disrespect me repeatedly because I didn't want to seem difficult. Every time they crossed a line, I told myself I was the one overreacting. I convinced myself I was being too sensitive. And you know what? That only made me resent myself even more. It wasn't until I finally stood up for myself, firmly but respectfully, that I realized something. I had been teaching them that their behavior towards me was acceptable. The truth is, people will only treat you the way you allow them to. And when I stopped allowing poor treatment, my life changed. So what's the way out? The answer is simple, but not always easy. Boundaries. Not just for how others treat us, but also, and this is the tougher one, also how we treat ourselves. The way we treat ourselves sets the stage for how others will play. The only way to stop this cycle is to break it. And for me, that meant setting boundaries, even when it felt uncomfortable. Saying no to things that weren't a hell yes. Standing up for myself when it was necessary. And walking away also when necessary, and sometimes without an explanation. I had a friend who used to constantly make backhanded comments, undermining my confidence. He thought he was being funny, but he sure liked to dance around the trigger button. I learned pretty quickly what to and what not to share with him. For years, I simply tolerated it. I told myself, that's just how he is. But one day I realized, why in the absolute hell am I allowing this? Why was I making space for someone who tore me down for their own amusement? So I cut them out. No big confrontation, no drawn-out explanation, just a simple decision to put myself first. And let me tell you, it was one of the best things that I have ever done. Letting go isn't about waiting for someone to apologize. It's not about closure. It's not about changing someone else's behavior. It's about reclaiming your own power. When you start enforcing your boundaries, your world shifts. You stop wasting energy on relationships that drain you. You start valuing yourself more. And most importantly, you start living a life on your own terms. The moment you stop tolerating less than you deserve, the game changes. People will either rise to meet your boundaries or they'll fall away. Either way, you win. As always, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Wolverine Lifestyle Podcast. If it resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need it. It's the best way to get this message out there. And if you're ready to take a step further into your own self-exploration journey, grab my free ebook, 30 Days to Know Yourself. The link will be in the show notes, along with all of the rest of my links to the rest of my socials and resources. Until next time, remember, reclaim your power by setting boundaries, because you teach others how to treat you with every single choice you make.